There's nothing like the White House, and being in the Oval Office, every time I used to walk in there, I always pinched myself.
Bret Baier is having a moment. The anchor of Fox News' special report hosts the rare news show whose audience and influence aren't just growing, they're exploding. In recent months, Baier has interviewed top Trump officials like Elon Musk, Scott Bessent, and J.D. Vance, as well as powerful foreign leaders who want to make their case to his massive right-of-center audience.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, French President Emmanuel Macron.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for the time.
Not at all. Thank you for having me.
Oh, and don't forget, Baier's regular sit-downs with the president himself.
You are going to be the first sitting president to attend a Super Bowl.
Well, first of all, I'm very surprised to hear that.
Fox News is known for its opinion shows, but that's not really what Baier does. He's a newsman, a longtime journalist. I caught up with him earlier this week to talk to him about his unique position in Trump's Washington. We discussed how things have changed in media and politics since Trump's return, how journalists lost the public's trust and can win it back, what his legendary golf games with the president are like, and why he's following Donald Trump to the Middle East next week. I'm Dasha Burns, and this is Playbook Deep Dive. Bret, thank you so much for being here today from the faraway land of Palm Beach.
Sure, happy to be here.
Let's talk about your other home, which is Washington, D.C. I want to start with actually kind of how you got here, because I know that you were in the Atlanta bureau for Fox, and then 9/11 happened, and things totally changed for you, for your career, for the nation, really. But can you walk me through how that was a big pivotal point for you?
I started in the Atlanta bureau with Fox. I guess that's 27 years ago. So the Atlanta bureau started with a fax machine and a cell phone in my apartment. And
Can you explain what a fax machine is to
Yeah,
some of our
exactly. What is that? But definitely my kids do not know. But the cell phone was about this size. And I bounced around the Southeast and South America and covered stories and fed them to the mothership in the early days of Fox and worked for Brit Hume, always trying to get on Special Report with Brit Hume doing politics stories. 9/11 happened and the first plane hit in New York. And we were told, a producer and myself from Atlanta, to back up in New York to do Fox affiliate shots because this plane had hit one of the towers. So we went to go book a flight at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, and then the second plane hit, and they said, get in your car. And we left the Atlanta bureau and started driving towards New York. And then the third plane hit, and they rerouted us to the Pentagon. And I started doing live shots for Fox affiliates outside the burning Pentagon that night. Wow. And never left. I did that for a little while and then became the Pentagon correspondent, was on a trip with then Defense Secretary Rumsfeld as he was making the case for war around the world.
You've covered pretty much every administration since then.
Yeah.
How does this administration, I want to talk about how it differs from Trump's first term, but in general, how does this particular White House differ from the other administrations that you've covered?
Well, there's nothing like it. The Trump.
I was going to say, it's a long list of differences, right?
Trump number one and Trump number two. And as you're right to point out, they are different.
Trump not only has changed, everything about how so much of government functions, but also the media. What has happened in your eyes to the press since the beginning of the Trump era?
Well, Trump won. There was, obviously a lot of focus on the Russia investigation for months and months. And I think that dominated news cycle after news cycle. And it affected the way the president dealt with the press and the way the White House dealt with the press. And, I think that there was a defensive and a push and pull there based on that story. And maybe, arguably we missed some other big things about Trump one. I always say that there was, the story above the water, sort of like an iceberg that you could see. And that was the focus and everybody was focused on. But below the water, there's also a big iceberg. They're trying to change Washington in their own way. They weren't really that successful in the big change, which led to a loss in 2020 and obviously a completely different administration. But after 4 years, I think Trump, too, had 4 years to plan what they wanted to do, which is why this shock and awe executive order blitz happened at the beginning. And I think that they're getting about the lower part of the iceberg more day to day. And we'll see if they're successful in what they want to try to do.
Do you think his relationship to the press has changed between the first administration and the second administration?
I'm not sure he was open, but he wasn't as open as he is now as far as taking adversarial questions, taking questions pretty much every day. He's had so many Q&A sessions that, or sprays, as you know, spray in the Oval Office usually is like, okay, everybody, let's get out of here. It's one little sentence. That could be 30, 40 minutes of a Q&A that's ahead of a news conference. So,
Sometimes an hour.
yeah, exactly. And this White House in that session is making a ton of news by what he says. So all of that is news through the day. It changes my show 5 or 6 times before I get to 6 o'clock.
I don't envy the folks putting together your rundown.
Yeah, I mean, we rip it up many times, right about 5 till 6. But I think he's different. I think he's more comfortable in his skin. He's obviously doing bigger, bolder things. Not that they're very popular, as we're seeing, but he's holding to what he campaigned on, and in his mind, doing what he wants to do, I think.
You mentioned that some of them aren't so popular. I mean, he's in a risky place with his trade policy right now. What do you think could be the downside to that? Do you think he's in danger right now?
Well, listen, people don't like looking at their 401ks if they're retiring and seeing it shrink dramatically. They don't like a slowdown in this quarter of GDP, a shrinkage of the economy, first time in 3 years. They don't like it. And it obviously comes with a reverberation, like what's going on? Is this thing going to work out? I know the ultimate goal is to rebalance and shift the paradigm in the world and bring, manufacturing back to the U.S., but that's a long time. And in the short term, there could be some pain.
Fox News is often known for some of its more conservative, opinionated voices, right? That is not the lane that you own. How do you navigate being under the Fox News umbrella, but sort of owning this lane that is more just straight journalism?
Well, a couple of things. One, I've done it for 27 years and it's been the same umbrella and it's been the same questions. A lot of people paint with a broad brush about our opinion shows. And, I tell people to watch my show 3 times and drop me an email or a post on X or Instagram or TikTok and say what you think. So most people go through that. They come back and say it was fair on the news. When I took over for Bret Hume 16 years ago, which is hard to believe, he said 3 things. The show is not about you. The show is not about you. And let the news drive the show. So that's where my goal is. And at the end of that hour, I'm trying to have people say, I know what's happening in the world and in the U.S. and the important things that are happening in Washington. And I think I got a balanced approach to it.
I think that one thing that has changed in the Trump era, and I don't know if it was because of Trump or if Trump was a byproduct or a symptom of it or fuel on the fire, but everything that you just said, a lot of reporters have started to do the opposite. It has become a lot about me, and it has become let opinion or ideology drive the day rather than the news. And look, there's a business model there, right, too? Like, some people do want to turn on the TV and hear opinions and analysis, and there's a place for that. But I do think that a lot of folks started to go either, to the left or to the right, because that's where the virality was, that's where the energy was, sometimes that's where the money was. And now we're in this environment where I think in part because of that, it's really hard for people to discern, like, what is news, what is opinion, who to trust, who to listen to kind of just for entertainment. I do think we still need people who are out there. I don't think I always get it right, but who are genuinely trying to just deliver the news and make it about the story and make it about the people in power and the people who are being impacted. But that's been eroding, right? So how do you think we can try to carry that mantle and not just let that part of our business survive, but thrive? How do we bring people back to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say the opinion people do an amazing job in what they do. and they have opinions, and they clearly express them. I do a different thing. Um, I think if you build it, they will come. And that's really what the mantra of our show. We have these things, we say, we report, you decide. It's literally what we're trying to do. We'll tell you what both sides are saying. We'll tell you what this senator's saying. We'll tell you what Democrats, Independents, Republicans are saying. You make the decision how you feel about it. We're not going to tell you whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You make the decision. And story choice, how you go about that, all makes a difference in especially how middle America views the media. Unfortunately, our business has taken a real hit. And I think trust took a hit over the past 8 years. I mean, there are a lot of stories that, groupthink was like, you can't think that way. And that's a conspiracy theory. The Wuhan lab. We did one of the first stories about the allegations that the virus came from the Wuhan lab, and people said, you are nuts. We just put it out there. This is one of the things. Senator Tom Cotton, says this. And it was the establishment group said, we were conspiracy theorists. Now fast forward to, 3 years, and here we are.
When it comes to President Trump and his expectations for an interview with Fox News and an interview with Bret Baier, how do you navigate that relationship? Because he's gotten mad at you before. You've had some friendlier interviews. You've had some more combative interviews. What is that relationship like? And how do you manage expectations for him and his team that this is going to be a Bret Baier interview?
Yeah. So anytime I go into an interview, I expect that they know, and I tell them up front that this is going to be tough but fair. He's going to have an opportunity to answer questions and say what he wants to say, but I'm going to press him on things. Now, you say friendly interview. The Super Bowl interview is a little different environment in that it was the Super Bowl. So I had to ask questions about the Super Bowl and other things, but at times push back about his thoughts about the economy and where it stands and what his policy was going to be. The interview before that, he described as nasty, but he got over it. And
he still takes your calls?
Yeah, he does. And listen, I think that off-the-record conversations with the President of the United States, any journalist would welcome, just to know where his head is. Because day to day, depending on where the day is going, it's a good thing to have a blueprint of what they're thinking.
Speaking of off-the-record conversations, you've played golf with President Trump. Mm-hmm. How often has that happened?
It's a handful, maybe more than a handful of times. He's a good golfer, and I played in college, so I think it fits. And
do you let him win, or how does that work?
I try not to. I try not to. I really do. But it's a great time to be able to not only play golf, but at times ask questions about what he's thinking about X, Y, and Z, and just be open to listening to that. I would play with President Obama. I've seen him out at a club, and looking forward to setting up a golf match like that. I think anytime that you have the access like that, any journalist should take it and welcome it.
You do have him lashing out at members of the media, some of your own colleagues, and certainly with the AP. You were pretty outspoken in pushing back in defense of journalists when he banned the AP. How do you thread that needle? And do you think that actions like that, like banning news outlets, do you think that could potentially backfire and actually be a bad thing for this White House?
100%. And I've said that both publicly and privately. And I've made that clear that I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's good for precedent. I don't think that you want any administration steering what news organizations editorially can do as far as their access in a pool. The AP has obviously been around since the beginning of time. And so I've talked about that, and I think it's not a good thing. It's not really a thread the needle thing. I think there are certain things where you have to weigh in, and you have to say, this is what I believe. You're going to make your decision, but I'd like you to have the informed decision that me as a journalist, I believe this is not a good move.
This is like a big philosophical question that I don't expect you to have a perfect answer for, but who do you think is to blame for the lack of trust in the media, for the loss of trust in the media?
Well, the media, clearly. I mean, we went after collectively, and I say broadly, stories that didn't pan out, and it went overboard on covering some of it, and then at times wore opinion on their sleeves in news programs that really don't fit under the opinion umbrella. We talked about the opinion shows on Fox. There were times where I would watch what I thought was a news show on other channels that became very opinionated and pretty one-sided.
Do you think
So,
Trump had any role to play in that, though,
of
in the
course,
loss of trust?
of course, yeah, he kind of broke the system,
Hmm.
and maybe that was part of his MO, what he wanted to do. But middle America didn't trust what they were getting from a lot of the media, and you saw that, even in polls of the election that suggested, he was going to lose up until the last minute. There was a lot of people that just didn't buy in.
Do you think that there's a danger now of over correcting too? I mean, you got some criticism for your interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. Some people said you were much harder on her than you were on Trump or
Sure.
on Elon Musk or any of those folks. Like, what do you say to that?
Well, I'd say the environment. I think that the vice president was coming in ready to engage like that. She wanted
Hmm.
and I heard that from her folks afterwards that they were happy that
Hmm.
was the MO.
You were responding to the vibes you were getting, you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. And
Yeah.
some of the answers were really interesting in items that I thought clearly they knew I was going to ask about illegal immigration and the number of people coming across the border. And, the answer was, well, we need this comprehensive bill. And yeah, I just went down methodically about, well, couldn't you do by executive order a number of different things? And she kept on coming back to the comprehensive bill, and they've done all they can do. Obviously, that is not the case right now with the numbers we've seen on the southern border.
We're watching Eric and Donald Trump Jr. right now making a lot of business deals around the world. Is that something that the media should be looking at just as hard as what Hunter Biden was doing?
Yeah, 100%. And if you're going to play it one way, you've got to play it another way, and you've got to cover all of those things. I think there are real questions about, how that works, what access looks like. I think there's been a lot of coverage of Jared and Ivanka and how that all came around after the first term. And I don't think there's a lack of coverage or questions about that. But the Hunter Biden thing was another one of those moments
Yeah.
where you can't do this. It's not true. This is all fake. Do not cover anything about this computer or this laptop. It's Russian disinformation. And here are 51 former intelligence officers who say it's Russian disinformation or has all the markings of Russian disinformation. And then President Biden goes to the debate stage and says the intelligence community says it's Russian disinformation. And that was another one of those moments where middle America said, wait, you just told me this is totally false. And yet now, a year later, it's true. And you're doing front page stories about it after the election. It's, that's one of the trust things.
One thing that's saddened me in like TV and just media in general is that conservatives tend to go on these programs and liberals tend to go on these programs, and I think that's just not healthy for a democracy. Is it hard though for you to sometimes get Democrats on your show? I know you talked about President Biden; he didn't do a lot of media, period. But do you ever run into that challenge of like, hey, come on and talk if you want to reach our audience?
No. This week, we're going to have Senator Bernie Sanders on the show, on set, on Special Report. He's come on numerous times. We did town halls with Democrats, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, a number of the primaries. We did
How
town
important
halls.
is that to see those in power run the gamut of media?
I think it's really important. And it's great for democracy. It's great for voters. It's great to hear different questions from different points of view. And I think that that's really good. Now, President Trump, as I just said, is doing the rounds in a number of different media operations. But I have a lot of Democrats who come on the show. I do this thing called Common Ground, where I bring Democrats and Republicans together to talk about what they're working on as opposed to what they're fighting about. We talk a little bit about what they're fighting about, but we then eventually get to what they're working on together. And we started it about 2 years ago. And at first, people were saying, how are you going to get them to come together? And the first ones, we did it. And suddenly it was like a stone going down a mountain, kept on gathering and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, we take calls from ranking members and chairmen. We'd really love to talk about this. And I've had strange bedfellows, Comer and Raskin come on together. Wow. And, I think there's a way.
Odd couples.
To talk about things. And we don't often do that because in the media, obviously, we're looking for the thing that drives people apart. And
I was going to say, you're
controversial.
You're defying all kinds of expectations. People say TV news is dying. Your ratings are going up. People say you need conflict to get ratings. You're finding common ground for ratings. Before I let you go, I do want to talk about this big Middle East trip. You're going to the Middle East with President Trump. What are your expectations for that? What are you hoping to learn from that trip?
Well, first of all, every time you go to a foreign land in a presidential trip, it is quite something to see. I was on the last Middle East trip in Saudi Arabia, and it's all of these countries obviously roll out the red carpet. They know how President Trump operates, and it's interesting to view. This trip, I'm looking to talk to the leaders in those countries. We're working to line up each one: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE. And then I'm looking to talk to the president at the end of the trip before he goes back to see exactly what he thinks about it and what he got out of it. I think a lot's going to come around on the Saudi trip. They have a lot on the table that's being negotiated right now. And my last time there, I interviewed the Crown Prince, MBS, and it was a big, big interview for an hour. His first interview with U.S. Or Western journalists. And I think that that's going to bode well for this trip.
What do you think is at stake for President Trump here?
There's a lot of balls in the air. There's Gaza, Hamas, there's Iran, the Houthis with this announcement that they're tired of fighting. That's a big, big deal. I mean, it was turning into 50 plus days of straight bombing of the Houthis. And then they just fired a missile on Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. That's a big deal. If that all happens and the Houthis do, in fact, stop and Iran somehow gets to the table, the biggest thing is if Ukraine and Russia, somehow Putin maybe shows up in Riyadh. And there is a big deal for a longer ceasefire. Think about all the foreign policy balls that are in the air. That's a good time to be on a trip. So we'll do the show live from each country, Saudi, Qatar, and UAE, and then be back next week.
Really quickly on Ukraine, President Trump, promised on the campaign trail he was going to solve that maybe even before day one. And now it looks like he's getting impatient with it. He's sort of threatened to walk away if the sides don't come together. What is at stake for him there?
Yeah, a lot. I think that that shot, the picture of the president with President Zelensky in the Vatican was a really iconic shot. But the other iconic shot, obviously, was Zelensky getting kicked out of the White House before that. And he came to Special Report right after that and did an interview. Zelensky did. I don't think he would have done that had I not gone to Ukraine the year before and been on the front lines to do an interview about the war. So listen, foreign policy takes time to the nuance of everything. But for the president, there's a lot on the line because I think he thinks of himself as the biggest deal maker in the world. And he may be. But some of these deals need to come together, not only on trade, but on stopping wars.
And my final and perhaps most important question, Bret, you have been to the White House here in Washington, D.C. You have also been to what's been dubbed the Winter White House,
Yes.
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
Which one's better?
Ah, the weather's better in Mar-a-Lago, but there's nothing like the White House. And being in the Oval Office, every time I used to walk in there and be positioned to ask a president and a world leader meeting there in front of the fireplace a question, I always pinched myself. Think about all the things, as I'm sure you do. Think about all the things that happened in this room, the decisions, and it's a big deal. It's a real honor to cover politics at a time when people pay attention to politics, and the world when people are paying attention to the world.
Well, Brett, thank you so much for doing this, and safe travels next week. We'll catch up with you on the other side.
Sounds good. Thanks for
All
having
right,
me.
cheers.